I have a funny history with the Superman movies. For starters, I have never seen the original film from start to finish. I only saw pieces of it when it came on TV, and I would never catch it from the beginning. So I used to stick around for a handful of scenes before I decided to change the channel in the hopes that I could one day watch it from the start. And I only managed to do that now in preparation for this Versus video. And Man of Steel, I haven't seen since it released on Blu-ray back in 2013. And of course, I am writing this video after seeing the new movie just once. So I am coming at these three Superman films very fresh, and that will give me a very interesting perspective, as I have no nostalgic or childhood loyalty to any of these movies. It's Donner versus Snyder versus Gunn, Reeves versus Cavill versus Cornsweat. Which of these Supermans had the superior movie? We are about to find out. Let the battle commence. Now, both Superman 78 and Man of Steel give us origin stories about Superman and adopt a traditional 3-act structure. James Gunn's Superman, on the other hand, very wisely does not retell us his origin story, and probably unwisely does not adopt a traditional 3-act structure. It instead decides to make its structure more akin to a comic book, and that means the movie goes at a breakneck pace and doesn't really hold your hand. And it takes a good 20 to 30 minutes to really get a proper understanding as to what is going on, as it just drops you into the thick of the story. Now, depending on the viewer, this can either be great or incredibly frustrating, because most mainstream audiences who watch superhero movies do not read comic books, so the 3-act structure of a movie is much more fitting as it introduces you to the world and paces itself. And that's the one thing I can say that both Superman 78 and Man of Steel have over Superman 25, is that they are more coherent. Each scene goes to the next in a way that's easy to follow, it throws just the right amount of information at you, and it doesn't quickly go from one plot point to another. But with James Gunn's Superman, I constantly felt like things were being introduced, and then we weren't given the proper time to process them or have the movie flesh them out. Now, the first movie is about Superman's origin story and him having to stop Lex Luthor's plan to wipe out a population of people so he can build himself a utopia. Man of Steel is about Superman's origin and Zod's invasion of Earth to replace it with Krypton, and Superman 25 is about Lex trying to set up a series of events including wars just so they can use Superman's opposition of those wars to paint him as the bad guy, and the whole movie is about dragging Superman's name and reputation through the dirt and then having Lex try to kill him, and get a bunch of land for himself in the process. And the story feels less like it starts at Act 1, and is instead starting at Movie 3, because big long-term plans have already been put into motion by Lex, and now Superman has to face them. Now, Superman 79 starts out as a sci-fi drama which even has horror elements, then it turns into a coming-of-age story, and then it becomes a superhero film when Clark Kent becomes Superman and works at the Daily Planet, and then switches to superhero mode when disaster strikes. And the movie very impressively manages to seamlessly transition between these different tones. Man of Steel is a much more serious telling of the story and partly takes from Superman 78. That being the sci-fi drama, the coming-of-age story, albeit through flashbacks, we also get sci-fi horror elements, and then Superman revealing himself to the world and protecting them against an alien invasion. And the movie is very serious. The film goes for a more handheld documentary approach to his cinematography, and Superman doesn't become Clark Kent or work at the Daily Planet until the very last scene of the film. And yes, the serious tone, it does feel dull and out of place for a Superman movie. Superman is a much more bright and hopeful character, and all of these dark and gloomy colors and this messiah complex that this movie has by treating Superman as a god rather than a human being is very melodramatic and obnoxious. And James Gunn's Superman is one tone throughout the film. It throws you right into the middle of an ongoing story, and it's a nice and hopeful Superman movie, even referencing the present-day genocides in the Middle East and how Superman and other superheroes would react to this situation, which is very timely and relevant. And Superman would help the innocent people in this situation, so it's a great setup. But it felt too small scale, nowhere near brutal or high stakes enough like real life, and when it was all said and done, it didn't feel as rewarding a victory as I felt it should have. And unlike the other two Superman movies, it was the least consistent with its tone. There were many jokes being thrown around that don't fit a Superman movie, and 95% of them weren't even funny. Now, the 5% of jokes that were funny were great, but for the most part, the jokes did nothing for the movie, and my theater was completely silent and had no reaction to them. And it amazed me how this movie would just sabotage its own tone at times. And it's not helped by the fact that the movie tries to cram tons of plot points, subplots, and characters into a 2-hour runtime, which makes the movie feel hectic and uneven. And plot lines and characters that I wish had more time, like Superman's shocking realization that he was sent to Earth to conquer, the relationship between him and his adopted parents, as well as his relationship with Lois, weren't given anywhere near as much time as they needed. The jokey subplots with Jimmy Olsen getting scoops from his ex was just taking up time that could have been better spent elsewhere. At the very least, these scenes should have been done via text messages and phone calls. It would have been much more time efficient and less cringy. But the way they went about doing it, it felt like his whole subplot was attached to one running gag, which I never found funny to begin with. Now, when you take all of this into account, James Gunn's Superman feels like the movie that objectively has the worst story out of these three films. It's too bloated, has an inconsistent tone with jokes that aren't funny, and has too short a runtime for the sheer amount that is going on. However, what Christopher Reeves and James Gunn's Superman have over Man of Steel is a soul. And Man of Steel doesn't have a soul. It's very monotone and lacks an upbeat energy to it. And although I was more open and receptive to this tone now after rewatching the movie over 10 years later, I still think it was missing some of that Superman magic. That tone that makes you smile as you're watching.
Would you like a glass of wine?
No thanks. I never drink when I fly.
But at the same time though, it doesn't just drop you into the middle of a story like Superman 25. It takes its time and guides you through from beginning to end, so you're not left feeling like scenes should have been longer in length. But you do feel like they lacked a soul, whereas with Superman 25, it's the reverse. It had the soul, but it didn't have the length. And this was the sticking point for me, as both films are on opposite extremes of the spectrum here, and that's what makes it so hard to pick which one is superior to the other. Superman 78, however, there is a reason it is considered a classic after all these years. It really was the master of tone, whilst giving the appropriate amount of time to its story without rushing through any of its plot points or characters. And I will tell you right now that Superman 78 has the superior story to both of these movies. It has a far more sophisticated and balanced tone, it has a story that fits the runtime, and despite its ridiculous ending, it got so much right that I was always able to overlook it. But with Man of Steel and Superman 25, because the two are on extremely opposite sides of the spectrum, I'm at a stalemate here and don't really know which one to pick. You know what? I've watched Man of Steel twice now, so it's only fair I do the same for James Gunn's Superman. I'll be right back. So, I have now seen James Gunn's Superman a second time, and my opinions on the length have sadly not changed. But the tone of James Gunn's Superman did have an even bigger impact on me the second time round. Sure, it's flawed as all heck, but it's just so joyous. And that does make the story nicer to sit through. And I will say, I think that the actual story we have for Superman 25, despite its superish pacing, is not a bad one. There are a lot more details that you notice the second time round, especially with Lex and the manipulative plotting he does with government officials. And the tone of the movie, although far from perfect, and certainly not consistent, is still superior and far more fitting to Superman than what we had in Man of Steel. It feels like a more faithful telling of a Superman story and has plenty of life and energy to it, whereas Man of Steel has the consistency but lacks the life and energy. So the movie with superior story and tone is Superman 78, Superman 25, and finally, Man of Steel. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more reviews and Versus videos. And if you join my Patreon, you will unlock trailer reactions, early access to Versus videos, and you can also join my private Discord server. So, back to the video. Now, Christopher Reeves, he is Superman. His portrayal is so iconic. Not only does he have a confidence and playfulness as Superman that is unmatched, but he also does an amazing Clark Kent. To this day, he is the only Superman to have a vastly different dorky take on Clark Kent to contrast with his Superman. The way he changes his voice and shifts his whole body language and demeanor is so entertaining to see. It's truly like watching a transformation in real time, and it works. Even with those large dorky glasses, he can still look like Superman. And I even love the little subtle parts of his performance. I want you to look closely at this scene and look at his face as soon as Lois looks at him and says, "Clark."
Clark said that you're just a figment of somebody's imagination. Like Peter Pan.
Did you notice the one extraordinary thing he did?
You can see that he actually thought he got caught there. For a second, he thought she called him Clark.
Clark said that you're just a figment of somebody's imagination. Like Peter Pan.
Lark, who's that, your boyfriend?
And I love his quick response and fix there. Little touches like that to his performance, on top of everything else he does, really makes his portrayal as Superman so special.
I guess I must have fainted.
Fainted? You fainted.
Sorry.
Now there are a lot of scenes of him as Clark Kent, but in Man of Steel and Superman 25, they only have one scene of Clark Kent at the Daily Planet each, and they don't change their voice or even their demeanor. David Corenswet is partly there with his disguise, but his voice sounds exactly the same.
Yeah, it's all there in my article. He didn't completely kick Superman's ass.
And Henry Cavill is exactly the same too, but does even less, as the only part to his disguise is that he's wearing glasses.
Glad to be here, Lois.
Now Henry Cavill's Superman, I actually thought he was incredibly dull, at least when the movie starts. The interactions he has with Jor-El are spoken in such a dull tone, and you don't ever feel like you get to know who he is as a person.
Why did you send me here? Why didn't you come with me? Why am I so different from them? So I'm alone.
The same with when he first suits up as Superman. It's a great sequence and all, but I don't know this Superman at this point. And we're about 45 to 50 minutes into the movie at this point. The only time he really started to feel like Superman was when he turned himself in. That's when Henry Cavill really turns on, and he had that Superman confidence and wisdom about him. But the thing he lacked was the playful side. And we still don't really know anything about him as a character. We've seen the struggles he's had to endure throughout his life, but that's it. We still don't really know him. And sadly, that means you don't really care about him. Now Henry Cavill could have pulled it off if they had given him the chance, but the script never did, and that made him a very wooden Superman. And then we have David Corenswet. Now something I wish James Gunn would have told us is that this is an early days Superman, because the way he was describing it and the way the movie was marketed, he made it seem like we were gonna get the calm, collected and experienced Superman. But it wasn't until we started seeing clips hit the internet where he would yell and lose his cool that we realized he wasn't there yet.
Where's the dog?
But knowing that, I thought that David Corenswet did a very good job. From his first scene, he is incredibly likable and is full of charisma. And I like how, despite being advised to rest because he's not at full strength, he still gets up and is ready to go out there to save the day. This is a Superman that cares about life. And he cares about it to such an extent that he is willing to ignore what politicians say, and he doesn't even want to see a squirrel die. He even tried to talk the Justice Gang into keeping this kaiju alive and sending it to a space zoo or something, and they are just fed up with his goodness. And I like that, because it's what differentiates him from the other superheroes. And if anything, he is just too good. So, they're establishing him as a Boy Scout. And I love that, because you know that this is going to irritate Batman whenever they meet. And it's also very true to his character, because Superman is very commonly referred to as a Boy Scout. And this movie perfectly illustrates that. But this Superman's goodness is what really sets him apart from Henry Cavill. He has personality, and it very quickly establishes him as a likable character. And this scene with him and Lois, it really shows you his mindset and how he values human life, and how unlike the Justice Gang, he has no problem going around our corrupt politicians if it means saving innocent people. And that's a side to Superman that we haven't seen in live action before, and it really enriches his character.
I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
You're gonna end up fighting every elected official in this country.
Sure you don't really mean that, Lois?
Superman, did you consult with the president before entering Bravian airspace?
No.
The Secretary of Defense?
Nope.
Or any U.S. official before you took matters into your own hands and decided the
Burkos
situation?
and his goons were going to kill people.
Yes, you seemingly acting as a representative of
I
the
wasn't
United States will
representing
cause
anybody
more
except for me.
problems.
And on a side note, I was surprised that we never got a costume change out of him or Henry Cavill. Christopher Reeves got plenty, and it's a fun and iconic part of the character, kind of like how Batman has his suit-up montage. So why they didn't take advantage of it, I don't know. Now, no one is talking about this, but David Corenswet's Superman actually kills someone.
He did not.
He kills Ultraman by sending him into a black hole, and for all the shit people were giving Henry Cavill for killing Zod, at least there was a reason he did it, but Corenswet's Superman did not. Now, as I have explained, James Gunn's Superman makes a point that this Superman doesn't want to kill anyone, not even a squirrel or a giant kaiju, so it would have been a very smart and meaningful payoff if this Superman actually found a way to stop Ultraman without killing him. But no, he kills him, and then we get this joke.
Hey! This ain't playtime! Quit messing around!
I'm not messing around. I'm doing important stuff.
This really irked me, and it makes me think that James Gunn designed this set piece around the action scene and not the story or character. And when he lasers all of Lex's henchmen and they start falling onto the ground and on top of each other, I swear that some of them died or cracked their necks. Now you have got to be consistent. If you're gonna criticize Henry Cavill, you gotta criticize David Corenswet's Superman as well. And Henry Cavill's Superman was put in a situation where he had to make a decision there and then. But David Corenswet could have done something else, proving that there is another way. So I found that to be very inconsistent with his character. So even though Superman 25 has his shortcomings, I still felt like I knew him far more than I did Henry Cavill's Superman in Man of Steel, who never felt like a human being, but more an untouchable, holier-than-thou, godlike figure. And in turn, that made him much more closed off, much less relatable, and lacked the warmth that you'd expect from Superman. So the movies with the superior Superman and Clark Kent is Superman 78, Superman 25, and finally, Man of Steel. Now, when I saw chunks of the original Superman movie as a kid, I never liked Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. I thought he was boring, too goofy compared to the more serious Lex in Smallville and the animated series, and he wasn't bold. Until the end of the movie, and I always thought this was a stupid shot. But watching the movie now as an adult from start to finish, I actually liked him. Don't get me wrong, he's not a great Lex Luthor, but the version they were going for, this more laid-back businessman who is definitely capable of doing some really messed up stuff, I really enjoyed it. And again, it goes to how well this movie handles its tone. And he's not a goofy character all the time, but he has moments of comedy, and it never feels jarring or abrupt. And the jokes are usually funny. His plan also made sense and is actually true to what some corrupt governments are trying to do now in present day. And Lex does have a dark side to him where you know he means business and is very dangerous.
Lex, my mother lives in Hackensack.
And for those who I know are going to ask in the comments, Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor sucks and is the worst Lex Luthor to ever hit the big screen, small screen, or any screen. And I have always said that he was playing Johnny Depp's Willy Wonka, and I stand by it.
It's cherry.
Let's never talk of him again. As for Zod, Michael Shannon is a great actor, but I never liked him as Zod, and part of that is because, admittedly, he was very different to Terrence Stamp's version, but it was also because there seemed to be something very generic about him. He got angry like a generic general and didn't have the incredibly otherworldly composure of Zod from Superman 2, and he didn't do much. In fact, his two henchmen did a lot more of the action than he did, and the movie's dull tone wasn't doing him any favors. But now that time has passed, and I know what to expect from Man of Steel, that has resulted in me lowering my expectations, and my opinions have changed on him. And he has also become somewhat iconic without me even realizing. For instance, whenever I played Injustice Gods Among Us over the years, when I play as Superman, I always use the Man of Steel skin. And once I do that, I feel like I have to face him off against the Man of Steel skin Zod. And doing that after all these years, this design has now become strangely iconic to me. It's a version that I'm just able to accept. And although I definitely think he could have done more on the battlefield, and had more of a character to him, I actually found myself engaged whenever he was on screen this time round. So bizarrely, the passage of time has really lifted some of the negative weight I have for this interpretation, and I was able to just watch and enjoy it as it was. His motivation was understandable, and his persistence in replacing Earth with Krypton really made me root for Superman to stop him. But I will say that he is a very basic villain. He's not deep or anything, but he's fine is the best way to describe him. And I think we all wanted a great villain, rather than one that was just fine. And then we have Lex Luthor in Superman 25, played by Nicholas Hoult. Now, I liked him in the first half of the movie. His performance was good, they did a very effective job at introducing him and showcasing his intelligence, and I did genuinely want to learn more about him. And seeing him speak to political figures and bringing them on his side was cool to see. And his Russian roulette game here was cold and evil. Now, we will get to his plan in a bit, but the first thing he did that made me question him was when he threw Superman into a cell with Metamorpho. Now, Lex has kidnapped Metamorpho's son and has threatened to kill him unless he transforms his hand into kryptonite to torture and kill Superman. So Metamorpho is actually a good guy in a bad situation. Now, for how smart Lex has been in this movie, this was very stupid of him, because he put Superman in a cage with a good person who Superman can talk onto his side, and that is ultimately what ends up winning the day for Superman. I mean, he basically said, Metamorpho, I have kidnapped your son, now I am locking you in a cage with Superman. You have no way out of this. What kind of master plan is that? He left his hostage in a cage with Superman, and then gets mad when it goes to shit. So that was a bad plan. But this is where the problems with his performance started to come in. When Lex in Smallville lost his superpowered prisoner who he locked in a cage, this is how he reacted.
I don't care. I want a level 1 lockdown. No one gets in or out.
No complaining, he keeps his composure and is very practical. But not this Lex, because from this point, he becomes a big baby like the High Evolutionary in Guardians 3 and starts yelling all his lines. Now, I'm not saying that he can't react to failing, but when under pressure, he has to maintain a level of control and dignity. He's an A-list villain after all, and not an undignified D-lister, and when James Gunn's villains get under pressure, they start to break down and yell. And for me, this is when they lose all of their intimidation factor. And to make things worse, they also give him a Loki scene with Crypto jumping on him, which first of all, should have killed him, and second, this happens in the middle of a serious and well-written speech between him and Superman, but it's just cut off with a joke. Cutting to the news report exposing him as a traitor would have been the perfect way to continue this scene, and I would have walked away a lot happier. But the Crypto scene was a joke that was not necessary and killed it for me. And this is exactly what I was afraid of when I heard Gunn was writing this movie, and when I saw this shot in the first trailer and this shot in another, and my concerns ended up being true. Now, I don't blame Nicholas Hoult. He has proven time and time again that he is a great actor. This is purely a script problem. James Gunn is just not smart enough to write for Lex Luthor. This is supposed to be a villain that is Superman's equivalent to the Joker, and we have gotten 2 Lexes worthy of that title, and this version had potential, but he completely dropped the ball in the end. Look at Lex in Superman 78 and Zod in Man of Steel. When they lose, they are clearly angry, but they don't break down like a little girl. A perfect example of a character breaking down is Lex in Smallville. This is the episode where he fully starts to embrace his dark side and the villain that we know, and things that he has wanted to say to Clark. He's been bottling it up for so many years, and he's finally getting it off his chest. So he raises his voice, he's even emotional, but he doesn't break down into a crying mess.
I did try, Clark. In fact, when we first met, you inspired me. All I wanted was to be your friend, but you turned your back on me.
I tried to be your friend, Lex. But all you care about is power and control.
This is Smallville! Meteor freaks, alien ships, cryptic symbols. These threats are real. Someone had to take control. Someone has to protect the world.
Listen to yourself, Lex. You're so caught up in your own delusions, you've lost track of reality.
You still feel that he is an incredibly dangerous villain, and that's what they should have done with Lex in James Gunn's movie, but he just completely lost it. This immature crybaby approach to a villain that James Gunn seems to like is so degrading for Lex Luthor, and it makes no sense, because like me, James Gunn thinks Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor is the best version of the character.
And you are the best Lex, let's admit it. We know you're the best Lex.
Come on, you're being funny.
I'm not being funny. You're definitely the best Lex.
Really?
Definitely.
But not right for your movie.
Not right for mine.
He's too good for your movie. So for him to have the same favorite and take the completely inferior approach absolutely baffles me. This Lex Luthor is not menacing. He could have been, especially after this scene where he reaches his peak, but it's all downhill from there, and he ends up losing all his dignity. He would have had some left, but that is until Crypto comedically cut him off and made him look like a bitch. We also have the Engineer and Ultraman, and they didn't really get any development, but they weren't meant to. They were just obstacles for Superman to fight, kind of like Zod's disciples in Man of Steel, and they served their purpose for that. Although Ultraman's creation took direct inspiration from Nuclear Man in Superman 4, you know, the best Superman movie of all time. I mean, that would be like if Matt Reeves took inspiration from Batman and Robin. So I thought this round would have been a steal for Gunn, especially given his competition, but he started strong, and to my absolute surprise, he came out last. So the movies with the superior villains is Superman 78, followed by Man of Steel, and finally, James Gunn's Superman. In Superman 78, Margot Kidder did an amazing job as Lois. Everything from her attitude to her quick-witted dialogue, and for all the talk of there being no strong female characters, back in 1978, she tried to defend herself at gunpoint against a mugger. Although, I don't know what her plan was after that kick. If it wasn't for Superman, she would have gotten shot. And there were very subtle moments, like when Clark opens a drink for Perry, and Lois just hits it on the desk a couple times and causes this to happen.
I'm sorry. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shake it up like that.
Oh, well, of course not, Lois. I mean, why would anyone want to make a total stranger look like a fool? I'll take that.
That was funny. And she even has great chemistry with Superman. Their first scene was great, and their next proper scene was also really good. Even Siskel and Ebert spoke very positively about these two, and it really came down to this scene, because you don't really see Lois and Superman on screen again for the rest of the film. She really is a great Lois Lane, and certainly set the standard for all future versions of the character. And I really liked Rachel Brosnahan's Lois too. I like how she sees sides of the world that Superman doesn't, and although I thought she was completely in the wrong in this interview, I like the banter and relationship that these two have, and she is a very good counterpoint for him. And when she's not playing devil's advocate for a story, she can cover his blind spots, and clearly has his back. Now, she's not perfect. I thought the relationship between her and Superman didn't reach the highs that it wanted to, specifically when the two dropped the L-bomb. And again, that is down to the movie's short runtime and the fact that it just drops you into the middle of things, including their 3 months long relationship. But that's not the actor's fault. Again, it's the writing. But overall, I really liked this Lois, and with stronger writing, I can actually see these two working well together. The actors really sell these two iconic characters, but again, here's hoping that the writing is stronger for them in the future, because their relationship did not come off as strong in this film. And then we have Amy Adams, and she is no stranger to Superman as she had been in Smallville. And this is the worst Lois Lane I have ever seen. Mainly because this is not Lois. She shares none of the characteristics of the iconic character and feels like she could be any random reporter. The witty dialogue and playful mannerisms, non-existent. And she also suffers from the dull tone that this movie has.
The questions raised by my rescuer's existence are frightening to contemplate, but I also know what I saw.
I figured if I turned over enough stones, you'd eventually find me.
I didn't want to tell them anything about you, but they did something to me. They looked inside my mind.
Whereas I can recognize elements of these iconic characters in all of these other actors, I recognize none of Lois in Amy Adams. And that is both down to the writing and the casting. Also, Amy Adams and Superman are just boring together, and have no chemistry. This is something that I only noticed when watching Man of Steel again for this Versus video, but I would actually go as far as to say that Amy Adams was completely miscast for this role. So even if they had a better script, I still can't see her playing Lois Lane. So the movie with superior Lois Lane is Superman 78, Superman 25, and finally, Man of Steel. Now, we don't see the Kents much in the original movie, but they make a big impression for the short time they're here. They're played by Glenn Ford and Phyllis Thaxter. And Mark Kent was good, but the scene that really stands out is between Clark and Jonathan. It was so good that I wish they had more scenes together before his death. And for all the praise Christopher Reeves gets, I think praise should also be directed towards Jeff East, who plays a young Clark Kent, and he does a great job. Now, in order to maintain continuity, they actually had Christopher Reeves dub over his voice, so we don't really hear him talking, but if you watch the extended cut, he has a couple of extended scenes that they never dubbed over, so you can actually hear his voice there.
Lana, don't bother with these, huh? I'll take them in with the other equipment. What are you talking about? I just been stacking all the...
Of course, it's part of the job being team manager and all, but I'd do it for you anyway.
I ran.
And quite frankly, I don't think the dub was needed. And it's at these moments where Ma Kent really comes into her own. She just lost her husband, and then Clark realizes that he has to leave. And just like that, she loses both her husband and her son at the same time. But in Clark's case, she knew it was going to happen one day and lets him go. The Kents are only here for a short amount of time, but this movie really takes advantage of the time that they have. And they are so memorable. And in Man of Steel, we have Kevin Costner playing Jonathan Kent and Diane Lane playing Martha, and they were just okay. Jonathan Kent says a lot of the same stuff to a young Clark that is said in the original, but whereas it comes across very natural in the original, it just comes across very wooden and heavy exposition in Man of Steel. They really suffer from the film's dull tone and messiah complex that it has for Superman. Jonathan does most of the talking, and he always talks to Clark in a very exposition-heavy way, and it never feels like he's talking to him like a father would.
You're the answer to are we alone in the universe. But you're not just anyone, Clark, and I have to believe that you were sent here for a reason.
The odd time he does talk to Clark like a person, he's hammering him for saving a busload of drowning kids.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
Now I get that he doesn't want Clark to be discovered, but this was not the way to handle it. It's like, now you're just confusing the kid. And his death just confused all of us. He went to save their dog and then dies in the most nonchalant way I have ever seen. And I just didn't care. And the movie strangely keeps showing him in flashbacks even after we see his death. And narratively, that felt wrong to me. When Bruce Wayne's parents die in Batman Begins, their deaths are really felt, and you don't see them again for the rest of the film. You get memories in Bruce's head, but no more flashbacks, because they're out of the story, and you feel their loss. But in Man of Steel, they show him in more flashbacks after he died, and that just hurts the impact of Jonathan's death. And Ma Kent, she was also okay. She barely has anything to do, and I liked her better in Batman vs Superman and Zack Snyder's Justice League. But in Man of Steel, she just didn't work. And then we have the Kents in James Gunn's Superman. And I found the Kents in this to be incredibly shallow. Particularly Ma Kent, who came across as a joke for most of the movie, particularly for having such a thick country accent that was bordering on caricature. But again, the movie is too short, so you don't get enough time to know them. In every interpretation of Jonathan and Martha Kent, they had wisdom and a presence to them, especially in Smallville. And when you get to an emotional scene with them, it meant something, because you've seen these wise characters reach an emotional breaking point, and it's both surprising and sad to see them break like this. But I don't know James Gunn's versions of the characters, so when an emotional scene happens, I just couldn't bring myself to care or be emotionally invested. This is a very tiny snippet of a scene, and I felt that it was being manipulative with his tears rather than genuine. Plus, they make it clear that Jonathan Kent is a big softie, so maybe he just cries all the time. And I thought he cried a bit too easily. The dialogue just wasn't strong enough to bring out those tears. And they come across as two simpletons rather than warm and wise parental figures as they have been in previous portrayals. So these versions of the Kents are the worst to me. I was never too keen on Zack Snyder's Kents, but I at least got to know them. I at least felt some of that warmth, even though they would say some really stupid stuff.
Maybe.
And Jonathan's trailer speech of, your actions, your choices, that's what makes you who you are, and I couldn't be prouder. This is such stock recycled dialogue that you've heard countless times before. And again, it probably would have meant something if I knew who they are, but I don't. Like with a lot of these characters, the movie relies on your preconceived knowledge of the Kents to carry you through, and that's not enough. The movie needed to give us dedicated time to know these two versions, and it just doesn't. Also, Smallville did this scene much better. The writing was much more impactful, and Jonathan Kent gave a much better speech to his son.
They are a flawed race ruling with strength, my son. That is where your greatness lies. I think I was sent here to conquer. What kind of planet am I from?
Maybe you did misread it, Clark. But even if you didn't, it's you who decides what kind of a life you're gonna lead. Not me, not your mother, not your biological parents.
Is that the kind of person I will become?
Clark Kent, you're here to be a force for good, not a force for evil.
Well, how can you be so sure?
Because I am your father. I raised you, and I know you better than anyone.
Now this is how it's done, and yet Jonathan is still scared here. There is far more depth to this same conversation in a 25-year-old TV show than there is in this movie. And that's why I expected better from the Kents with James Gunn's Superman. But instead, he gave us the worst version of these characters.
Me and Pa just wanted to call and say, congratulations on that front page. Boy, that is something. Pa says, don't be a stranger.
Aye, indeed. So the movie with the superior Kents is Superman 78, Man of Steel, and finally, Superman 25. Now, even though the action in Superman 78 isn't amazing by today's standards, and they do very questionable things with the physics, it's very impressive to see what they were able to accomplish back in the day. I was especially impressed with the effects in the climax. It's very clearly done with models, but there were certain angles and shots that made it look true to scale, and watching this on my 4K projector made it look really good and grand in scope. And I was genuinely impressed that they were able to do something like this practically, something that nowadays would be done with CGI. Now, none of the action is amazing, it's clearly very limited in what it can do, but the action scenes go with the story very well, and you are invested in each and every single one. The helicopter rescue in particular was amazing with its practical effects, special effects, and terrific sound design. And it's a really nice wholesome Superman rescue. And damn, watching Lois get buried alive and die, that was super intense. And again, they did it with practical effects, and I like how this Superman movie really has a hard edge to it. Now, people complained about the insane amounts of destruction that Superman did to Metropolis in Man of Steel, and I gotta say, I actually really like the action. I know people say that Superman wouldn't cause this much damage, and you're right, but I gotta admit, when I used to watch big scale action sequences of Superman in Justice League the Animated Series, I always wanted to see that in live action. And this movie actually gave me that many years later. So I never took huge issue with this like other people have. I'm actually glad that there is at least one Superman movie out there with this level of destruction. But James Gunn's Superman takes the middle approach and shows a lot of destruction, but also tries to make it controlled, as Superman tries to prevent as much of it as he can, which I honestly much more prefer. And I gotta say, I actually think this is the best action that James Gunn has ever done. Now, people really seem to like Mr. Terrific's action scene, but I thought it was nothing special. The song number didn't work, and it just felt like a less cool version of Yondu's arrow battles from the Guardians movies. And the Rainbow River, or whatever it was called, was also surprisingly underwhelming to me. The rest of the action, though, was awesome. Superman battling the kaiju, then seeing the Justice Gang join in, the battle against Baravia was fun, and the final action sequence with Superman was so good, and I just wanted it to go on. It was so much fun, especially on the big screen. And Superman's fight with Ultraman and the Engineer was also really good, especially the last move he pulls on them, which has actually been known to kill him in some DC stories. Although I do question Krypto's relevance in the Ultraman battle. I mean, Superman couldn't just laser Lexus cameras himself, he needed Krypto to do it. That didn't feel as smart or organically implemented as I feel it should have. Aside from those couple of things, I really enjoyed the action in James Gunn's Superman. Now, the only problem I have with Man of Steel's action is that once the military start coming in, it starts to look like action from a Michael Bay Transformers movie. Also, both movies seem to struggle with the CGI, particularly when it comes to Superman's CGI double. Now, Man of Steel is 12 years old, so I expect some of that to look fake by now, but I'm surprised that it's already quite noticeable in James Gunn's Superman. And he's got 12 years of technological advancement, so I'm surprised he's got some similar issues with the CGI double of Superman. And the action scenes between Superman and Zod and his disciples, I thought that was so fun.
You think you can threaten my mother?
That was really cool and satisfying. And this whole action sequence was also really good. And the final battle with Zod was so enjoyable. I remember not liking it so much the first time I saw it because there was a lot of talking in between. But this time, I don't know why, it just didn't really bother me as much. And this flight sequence is the best I've seen in any Superman movie, especially if you watch it on a projector like I did. Now, the 1978 movie was great for the time, but it's pretty obvious that it doesn't hold up to any of this. These are both on a completely different level, and I enjoyed the action in both of them, but if I had to choose, the Superman movies with superior action is Man of Steel, Superman 25, and finally, Superman 78. Now, Jimmy Olsen is fine in the original movie. He's not anything memorable, and he's mostly a background character, as a background character should be. In Man of Steel, they gender swap him into Jenny Olsen, only for Zack to later say in Batman vs Superman, oh no, we have Jimmy Olsen, he's a CIA agent or undercover, I can't even remember what he was, and I don't care. Basically, he was not a photographer, he was not a little nerdy white kid, and he gets killed off, so it doesn't matter what he was. This was such an idiotic creative decision that I haven't even heard Snyder fans defend this one. But yeah, Jenny Olsen is such a nothing character, and quite frankly, she just got on my nerves. A building is about to fall on them, and she is the only person in the city who decides to stare at it rather than run from it. And I couldn't stand the dedicated scene of Jenny being in danger. The movie really wants you to care, and you just just don't. So much like Lois, Jenny Olsen resembles absolutely nothing of the original character. Neither does this guy. In James Gunn's version, I like the actor they got to play him, but I don't like the character. He's kind of an asshole. He's also a chick magnet somehow, and it just comes off like another one of James Gunn's jokes. And given how short the runtime of this movie is, I wish they would have spent less time with him and given it to other characters, or at least shorten his screen time. Jimmy Olsen is a good character and I ultimately like him, but I really feel like Jimmy should have less screen time than everyone else. And James Gunn has said that apparently he's gonna have a streaming show. I don't know if it's a solo show or if it's in Mr. Terrific's show, but basically we're gonna get more of him later, so I wish that they would have put him more in the background. I get what his role in the movie is, but still, like I said, they could have had him on his phone doing text messages or phone calls, but dedicated scenes, I still don't see the purpose for that, especially with the limited runtime. But yeah, I did not really like this Jimmy Olsen. Perry White was good in the original. I liked how he was a loud boss who gives people a hard time, especially Jimmy, but he did have plenty of moments where he was more kinder to some of them, especially Clark. I liked Lawrence Fishburne's version in Man of Steel, except for when he does more Messiah dialogue.
Can you imagine how people on this planet would react if they knew there was someone like this out there?
And I was super excited to see Wendell Pierce play Perry White in James Gunn's Superman. If you've seen him in Suits, he plays a lawyer called Robert Zane, and the way he very politely tells people to get out is so perfect for Perry White.
Well, if you excuse me, Sylvia, we'll validate you on the way out.
Yeah, well, Robert, this is New York. I take a cab.
It's just my way of saying get the hell out.
Imagine him saying this to Lois and Clark. That would have been so hilarious. But sadly, we don't get to see any of that. Perry White is one of the characters with the least amount of screen time, and that was a big shame to me. We also have Miss Tessmacher. In the original, she is fairly straightforward. In James Gunn version, she is an annoying social media fanatic who no one can seem to stand. And I couldn't really stand her either. But I will say that she very smartly gives our characters the ammunition to win. And even the original one saved Superman. James Gunn's Superman also has the Justice Gang, and they don't really get too much development, which is fine because this is Superman's movie and not theirs. But I liked both Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner, especially what Guy says when he saves this kid. I found that hilarious. But I really didn't like Hawk Girl. They overused her battle scream, and she was just the most boring out of the three, and she had the least to do. So maybe they can make her better down the line, but so far, I'm unimpressed by her. So as far as side characters go, I think it's a mixed bag with all of the movies. But the disadvantage that James Gunn version has is that, like I said, the runtime does not give them much screen time. And the ones that do have screen time, like Jimmy Olsen, I did not really end up liking him all that much. And we have the Justice Gang, but the Justice Gang to me does not make up for the classic Superman roster of characters. And we really didn't get much of those in James Gunn's Superman. So, like I said, this really is a mixed bag. So, whichever one you pick really comes down to your own preference, but for me, the movie with the superior side characters is Superman 78, Man of Steel, and finally, Superman 25. I'm just gonna say it. James Gunn's Superman has the worst score out of all three of these films. It's by no means bad, but it relies very heavily on John Williams' main Superman theme, and the rest mostly consists of generic and forgettable superhero music. And the main theme is basically this couple of seconds from John Williams' theme. That's the couple seconds that it takes, and that is this new Superman's main theme. And when the best part of the music is about a couple seconds of an over 40-year-old movie score, that's not good. And curiously, despite using the John Williams score in all of the film's marketing, you never hear the full piece in the movie, not even when we get to the credits, which would have been the appropriate time to do it, but we get a song number instead, which felt so out of place. So from a technical standpoint, this is by far the least impressive Superman score, and James Gunn's song numbers don't fit a Superman movie. Now, Man of Steel was composed by Hans Zimmer and had its own original score, and it was a great original score, and it's become iconic in its own way, and it didn't have to run to the original. That being said, we all know what the superior score is. If it wasn't for John Williams, this movie would not have been as iconic and exciting as it is. Even Christopher Reeve said as much.
I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to John Williams. Without his music, Superman's powers are greatly diminished. Believe me, if you try to fly without that theme, you go nowhere. One step, two steps, and down.
And that is very true. So the movies with the superior score is Superman 78, followed by Man of Steel, and finally, James Gunn's Superman. At the end of the day, we have 3 very different Superman films here. After finally seeing Richard Donner's Superman for the first time, I was so surprised at how good it was. And yes, it's dated, but if you watch the 4K version with the new Dolby Atmos track, it almost sounds like a new movie, and I had an absolute blast watching the film. And when it was over, I felt that it was a very basic and overly simple film. And I don't know if that was a good or bad thing, but an hour or 2 later, I actually felt like watching it again. There is a beautiful warmth to this film. You really love the world it sets up, and Christopher Reeves and his dual identity really makes you want to revisit the movie again. And the romance is very classy in its execution too, even down to the words they say.
Clark said that you're just a figment of somebody's imagination. Like Peter Pan. Just,
Peter Pan, huh?
Uh-huh.
Peter Pan flew with children, Lois. In a fairy tale.
And this flying sequence between Superman and Lois is amazing and so iconic. And that's down to the actors and the fantastic John Williams theme. I do think that it went on for way too long though. As soon as we start hearing Lois's internal monologue, the scene starts to fall apart. Superman's smile starts to become less charming and more creepy, the flying becomes ridiculous, and even the effects start to fall apart. So they really needed to cut this scene down. And originally, Lois was going to sing her inner monologue, but they must have thought that was too much. And as for Man of Steel, I was right down the middle with this film the first time I saw it, and I thought it was the very definition of average. But now that I've seen it again over 10 years later, I actually wasn't as annoyed with its shortcomings anymore, and I surprisingly had a lot more fun with it this time round. I enjoyed the opening 20 minutes on Krypton, his first flight sequence was amazing, and as soon as Superman turns himself in, you get the confident Superman that you want. He could be loosened up a little and more cheerful and hopeful, but the confidence really makes you buy that this guy is Superman. And the action in the film was so good. But unfortunately, everything felt half-baked, and you didn't feel like you were fully invested in this world or its characters. And yes, that also means that you were not fully on board with this Superman. Heart and character are the 2 things this movie lacked. And James Gunn's Superman does have heart and character. When you get down to it, my main problem is the movie's short runtime. If it was longer, then most of my problems would be mitigated. But as is, I really like David Corenswet as Superman, I like how colourful the movie is, and I mostly liked the more upbeat tone the movie has. And it does give you a feel-good vibe when watching and even reminiscing on the film. But after watching it for the second time, I have realised where the issue with the pacing is. I think the movie skips the first half of its second act. When Superman's Kryptonian message from his parents is revealed, in his very next scene, Superman says that he's going to turn himself in. And I feel like we missed a chunk of the film here. What should have happened is we see the consequences play out. How Superman, someone who loves being around people, is now feared by everyone. Everyone is keeping their distance and is staying away from him. And the love for Superman is gone. And Lex Luthor gets to revel and enjoy the fact that Superman's reputation has been tarnished. And in this time, we could have gotten scenes of Lois, Clark's parents, and even the Daily Planet's reaction to Superman, and how Clark Kent is internally hearing about all of this, and on top of that, he even has to write negative stories about Superman, and everything he is hearing could emotionally really weigh on him. And whilst all the other civilians are afraid to approach him, Mally is the only one who does, and shows him support and kindness by talking to him and giving him another free falafel. As in his lowest moment, he is the only civilian who stayed by him. And that's when Lex would take notice of him and capture him, the one civilian who is still talking to Superman, making this scene so much more heartbreaking instead of just feeling rushed. And by adding all of this, we would have gotten some more character from pretty much everyone. We would have spent more time with Superman, Lois, Perry White, Clark, the Kents, and even Lex. And after all of this, he then decides to turn himself in. That would have enriched the last half of the film, and it even would have fleshed out and validated that final speech. But instead, it rushes into its second act, and that's the disconnect with this movie. The fallout was not given enough time to sink in and resonate before it moved on to the next stage of Lex's plan. This sadly results in the characters not getting enough screen time, the relationships and their development feels very thin, and it prevents the film from reaching the heights that it could have. It's time for the scores. At first I gave Richard Donner's Superman an 8 out of 10, but the more I think about it, the better it gets. So Superman the movie gets a 9 out of 10, Man of Steel has gone up 1 point to a 6 out of 10, and James Gunn's Superman, originally I gave this movie a 6 out of 10, but I did enjoy it more on my second viewing. and because of that, my score for Superman is a 7 out of 10. Yep, this is one of those situations where my score got higher in the Versus video, but I don't see myself giving it a higher score than a 7. The drawbacks are just too big. Much like Snyder's films, I actually would want an extended cut because it feels like the movie is missing out on some meat, particularly during the second act. Superman 78 and Man of Steel felt like they had a better 3-act structure, whereas the structure for James Gunn's Superman is very unconventional and I don't think it paid off. James Gunn is not the amazing filmmaker Hollywood are making him out to be. He's very good, but he's not amazing. He's just not as meticulous or prestigious like someone like Matt Reeves. There are too many ideas in his Superman film, and they're all competing with each other, and I think he needs more people to look over his scripts before they're given the green light. If there is one thing this movie has shown me, it's that James Gunn can make a Superman movie, but it also proved to me that he is never going to change. He is always going to lean into the comedy, he's always going to have the needle drops, and he always has to have a team of misfits. But he'll never challenge himself and make a completely different tone of film. And this movie has proved that to me. And I have lost all hope in James Gunn that he will adapt and evolve his style. Regardless, these are 3 very different Superman films, and you will get a very different experience with each of them. You know my favorite. Now comment below and let me know yours. A huge thanks to my patrons who continue to support the channel. If you like what I do and want to support the show as well, then head on over to my Patreon where you can gain early access to Versus videos, trailer reactions, and you'll also be able to join my private Discord server. You can find a link to my Patreon in the description below and in the pinned comment section. Thank you very much as always for watching, everyone. I spent so much time working on this Superman Versus video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And I will see all of you very soon. Take care.